Hey everybody, Dr. O again. Let's review tissues, okay? So we've worked our way up. We talked about atoms and compounds and molecules, kind of our basic biochemistry stuff, and then we put them together to make our organelles, that organelle level of organization. We put the organelles together to make our cells, the basic unit of life. So now we're taking that next step towards the entire human organism, which is the tissue. So define a tissue. A tissue is a collection of cells that have a specialized function. So you take a bunch of those cells that are doing the same thing and working together, and you now have a tissue. So as we'll see here in a moment, there are 4 basic tissue types. So everything in your body, even though we have hundreds of different cells, it boils down to one of 4 different tissue types. We'll get right back to that. So what is the study of tissues called? That is called histology. So ology means study of, so histology is a study of tissues. Next, what are the 4 basic tissue types that make up the entire human organism? So everything in your body is either going to be an epithelial tissue, a connective tissue, a muscle tissue, or a neural tissue. So epithelial tissue, just big picture, it's going to line and cover things. So is it lining a passageway? Is it covering something? So its job is to be a lining or a covering. I'm going to skip connective tissue because it's basically everything else. Muscle tissue is designed to contract, and neural tissue sends and receives electrical impulses. So how do you know what is connective tissue? Because think about it. Bone, blood, and fat are all examples of connective tissue. They don't have that much in common, except they have specialized cells. They have a ground substance, even though it might be liquid. And they have the protein fibers. So they have you can define them as connective tissue, but they don't have a ton in common except they're not the other 3 things. So that's kind of how I think of it. Does it line or cover something? It's epithelial tissue. Is it contractile? It's muscle tissue. Does it send and receive electrical impulses? It's neural tissue. If not, it's going to fall into that blanket category of connective tissue. So those are your 4 types: epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, neural tissue. Okay, what does the term avascular mean? It means without blood supply. So the reason that's important here is because the best example would be bone versus cartilage. Cartilage and bone are very, very similar. They're both examples of connective tissue, but cartilage is avascular, doesn't have blood supply, and bone does. That'll be real important in the future when we talk about bone growth and development. So, because basically hyaline cartilage becomes bone, and for that to happen, blood vessels have to show up. So that's what the term avascular means. That's not the only thing. Epithelial tissues are also avascular. They get their nutrition from diffusion. All right, what are the 3 cell shapes when classifying epithelial tissue? So if you're looking at epithelium, as you can see here, we're going to focus most of our time on epithelium. You have either simple or stratified, which is our next question, but the shapes are going to be squamous, cuboidal, and columnar. So squamous epithelium, think about like a round kind of fried egg looking cell. Cuboidal epithelium, like the name implies, a cube shape. And columnar epithelium, also like the name implies, a column shape. So squamous, cuboidal, and columnar. Next, define simple versus stratified epithelium. So simple means a single layer. Stratified means more than one or multiple layers. So as you'll see, we'll classify all these different tissue types as simple, squamous, stratified, columnar, etc. So which type is designed for protection and which type is designed for absorption and or secretion? So think about that. If you're going to try to diffuse things, you need to be a very short distance. So if something is really thick, then moving substances isn't going to work very well. So your simple epithelia is designed for movement, absorption, and or secretion. A good clinical example, think about like bronchitis. Your bronchioles get swollen and thick, which is why you're so tired when you have bronchitis, because you can't move oxygen through that thick material near as well as you can in normal bronchus. So simple, think absorption and or secretion, but it's fragile. It's only a single layer thick. Stratified, think protection. So like the roof of your mouth is going to be keratinized, stratified squamous epithelium, about the toughest tissue type in your body, because you're going to be eating hot stuff and sharp stuff, etc., right? Whereas the lining of your small intestine is simple columnar. It has to be thin so you can rapidly absorb all the stuff you're eating. All right, so that's simple versus stratified. We'll drink a coffee. Don't eat macadamia nuts right before doing these videos. All right, so that's simple versus stratified. Know the key examples of different epithelial tissues that I noted in the lecture outline. Let me just move this. Okay, so we'll go through all of them quickly, but some I'm just going to say aren't that important. So we'll start with simple squamous epithelium. That's a single layer of these thin fried egg cells. So the thinnest, most delicate tissue in your body. So the key examples of them would be the endothelium, which lines your blood vessels. The reason that's important is because the actual cause of heart disease, whether you want to blame stress, smoking, whatever, is endothelial dysfunction. Damage to these cells, your body responds to that damage by laying down plaque and et cetera, et cetera. So the endothelium lining your blood vessels is one key example of simple squamous epithelium. The other one would be your alveoli, the gas exchange surface of the lungs, where we actually trade oxygen for carbon dioxide. Okay, next we have stratified squamous epithelium. So it's going to be multiple layers, and there's two types there. So we'll talk about keratin more in the future, but there's keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Keratin is the protein that makes like your hair and nails and makes your skin tough and water resistant. So it toughens up these cells. So keratinized stratified squamous epithelium, that's going to be the roof of your mouth and your skin. So think protection. But regular non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium, that's going to be, you know, the rest of your mouth, your pharynx, your throat, your esophagus, these kind of things. The vagina would be stratified squamous epithelium as well. So they're all designed for protection, but the keratinized stratified squamous is going to have even more protection. So that's simple versus stratified squamous epithelium. Simple cuboidal epithelium, primarily going to see those in the ducts, D-U-C-T-S, the ducts of your kidneys, but I don't worry about them much. Stratified cuboidal, same thing. You'll see them lining some ducts, but there's going to be multiple layers of cube cells, not near as important. Simple columnar epithelium, that's going to be the middle of your GI tract. Your stomach, your small intestine, and your large intestine are going to be simple columnar epithelium. So you think about your GI tract. The mouth, the throat, the esophagus, they're going to be stratified squamous epithelium because they're designed for protection, to be tough. The stomach, the small intestine, and large intestine, that's simple columnar epithelium because you're designed to be absorbing and secreting things, secreting gastric juices, absorbing the nutrients that you consume, etc. And then the tail end of your GI tract, the rectum and anus, will be stratified squamous epithelium again. So those would be your key examples of simple columnar epithelium. Stratified columnar, not that big of a deal. There are other ones that don't follow that two naming convention. We have transitional epithelium. It's called that because it can expand or stretch and relax without taking damage. So most tissues, when you stretch them, they take damage. Like if you stretched a tendon or a ligament or your skin, think about stretch marks. But transitional epithelium can stretch and relax without taking damage. So your urinary system will be where you find those key examples. So the key example of transitional epithelium would be the bladder. But most of your urinary system would be lined with transitional epithelium. The only one we haven't covered then would be pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. So pseudo means false. So pseudostratified columnar looks like stratified columnar, but it's not. And that's because I can't, you'll see it in images, but the cells look like they're stacked on top of each other, but they're not. They all do attach to the basement membrane. So here, these are ciliated cells. I said in an earlier video that cilia, in a single-celled eukaryote, cilia would propel you kind of like oars on a boat. But since our cells are attached to that basement membrane, the connective tissue underneath these cells, and they're attached to each other, when the cilia contract, they move material across cells. So pseudostratified ciliated columnar, the key examples there would be your respiratory tract. They actually form what's called the ciliary or mucus escalator that carries mucus, I like to call it lung butter, up out of your lungs. So that mucus is trapping things like maybe bacteria, viruses, dirt, dust, smoke. It gets carried up out of your lungs so you can swallow it or spit it out. The other example would be parts of the reproductive tract use these ciliated cells to move sperm. So, all right. So that is pseudostratified ciliated columnar. As far as the tissue types go, I didn't mention that a lot of these cells would have microvilli. That's something we covered in the cell unit or cell chapter. But sorry about that. The best example I could give you would be the simple columnar epithelium would have microvilli. They need a massive surface area because they're absorbing and secreting liters of material every day. All right, so those are the key examples of different epithelial tissues that I noted in the lecture outline. So what are the key differences between endocrine and exocrine glands? So glands, just so you know, the reason we're talking about it here, they're a specialized type of epithelial tissue. So there are two types of glands in your body, endocrine and exocrine. So you've probably heard of the endocrine system and think hormones, which you should. Endocrine glands, they're going to dump their secretions into is the key there, into your body fluids, into your blood, into your interstitial fluid, which is the fluid between your cells. So that's going to be your endocrine glands are going to dump hormones into your body fluids so they can be carried where they need to go. Exocrine glands are going to dump their secretions onto surfaces. So, but the other key thing there is exocrine glands use ducts, D-U-C-T-S, ducts. Endocrine glands don't. So exocrine glands, think the glands, your digestive glands, the glands on your skin like sweat glands and stuff, those would be examples of exocrine glands. So you may not think, it's kind of weird, you may not think of like, so how could your digestive glands, how could they be exocrine? They're not dumping secretions onto a surface, but they are. So you don't think about it this way, but your GI tract is a hollow muscular tube traveling through your body, but it's not, its contents are not inside your body. It's a barrier between you and the rest of the world. I don't want to get into it in detail, but so exocrine glands, think your digestive glands and the glands like on your skin, your ceruminous glands and those, which we'll cover in the integumentary system. Endocrine, no ducts, dump their secretions into your blood. That's the simplest way to look at it. Exocrine glands use ducts, they dump their secretions onto surfaces. So that's endocrine versus exocrine. What are the two types of adipose tissue, and which is primarily for energy storage and which is primarily for heat production? So there's brown fat and white fat. So most of your fat is white adipose tissue. It's stored energy. A pound of fat can store somewhere in the ballpark of 3,500 calories. So white fat is energy storage. Brown fat's unique. It's fascinating. They're trying to find ways to increase brown fat. They've actually done like brown fat transplants in mice because brown fat has these uncoupling proteins where it can literally waste energy as heat instead of being used as a fuel source. So I imagine the lights here above my head. 99% of the energy that comes off these lights is not light, it's heat. So your brown fat, quote unquote, waste energy. So we need it to keep our bodies warm. That's why infants have more brown fat because it helps them regulate their body temperature. That's why if you're exposed to cold a lot, you'll get more brown fat to help keep your body warm. This is why some people use like cold plunges and cold thermogenesis, it's called, where they purposely get in cold water and these kind of things to speed up their metabolism and hopefully give them more brown fat. But so brown fat is about heat production. So this could explain why two people could eat the same number of calories and one of them gains weight, the other one doesn't. The one that has brown fat can burn the excess calories off as heat in ways the other one can't. So some of us are just lucky and blessed and we can store energy really well, right? So I'm sad if there's ever a famine. All right, those are the two types of adipose tissue. What is the primary difference between dense regular and dense irregular connective tissue? So we're not covering a lot of the connective tissues here because I like to cover them when we get to them, right? Like two examples of dense regular connective tissue would be ligaments and tendons. Well, we talk about them when we get to ligaments, which connect bones to bones, and tendons, which connect muscles to bones. But we have these loose connective tissues, like areolar tissue and these kind of things. We have the dense ones, but they can be broken down into dense regular and dense irregular. So it's the direction and organization of the fibers in these connective tissues that determines the difference. So dense regular connective tissue, the fibers are all running in the same direction. Dense irregular, all over the place like this. So here's why they both have value. Dense regular connective tissues are very strong, but only in one or two directions. So think about like a ligament, like the medial collateral ligament on your knee. Well, it will keep your knee. If I get hit on the outside of my leg, it will be really strong and try to hold that knee together, try to hold the tibia and the femur together. But if I get hit from the inside, it won't do anything. It'll be loose. It's only strong in that one direction. So that's dense regular connective tissue. Dense irregular, it's going to be protein fibers in all manner of directions. So it's not going to be as strong in any one direction, but it'll offer some resistance in all directions. So I think about like your skin, the connections of the dermis and the epidermis and how your skin can move and there's resistance in any direction. That's because of the dense irregular connective tissue. So, all right, know the three characteristics of each type of muscle tissue: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. So I like to look at them. There's three things to talk about for each one. So the skeletal muscle, well, let's go through all of them. Let's talk about whether they're voluntary or involuntary. Skeletal muscle is voluntary. I control it. Cardiac muscle, involuntary. I don't have to tell my heart, beat, relax, beat, relax, beat, relax, which is good. Smooth muscle, also involuntary. I don't tell my pyloric sphincter to open up so that stomach contents the chyme from my stomach can drip into the small intestine. So skeletal muscle is voluntary. Cardiac and smooth muscle are involuntary. So that's one way to look at it. Next is striated. It basically says how organized muscle is. If muscle is very organized, it's going to have the striated or banded appearance. Skeletal muscle is striated. It has a banded appearance. Cardiac muscle, also very organized, so it has a striated or banded appearance. Smooth muscle does not. Smooth muscle looks kind of like lips to me. It's kind of all over the place and it contracts kind of funny. So smooth muscle is much less organized than the other two, which is why it is non-striated. So it's the only one that's non-striated. So skeletal muscle is the only one that's voluntary. Smooth muscle is the only one that's unstriated or non-striated. The last one is, does the muscle cell or muscle fiber and muscle cell are the same thing. Does a muscle cell have one or more nuclei? So skeletal muscle, one muscle fiber, one muscle cell has multiple nuclei. That's because muscle stem cells have fused together to form one muscle cell. Muscle cells are massive. You know, the longest muscle in your body is the sartorius, and there are muscle fibers that run that length. So they're huge. They have multiple nuclei, but it's kind of cheating because it's because multiple muscle cells, these myoblasts, fuse together to make them. But that's why skeletal muscle have multiple nuclei. Cardiac and smooth muscle only have a single nucleus. So, you know, maybe we should have covered some more stuff here, but like I said, the connective tissues, I like to weave them more into when we actually get there. Same thing with neural tissue. We have a whole chapter on neural tissue later. Muscle as a tissue, we have a whole chapter on it later. So there's really no reason to. That's why I spend, I'd say 2/3 of my time covering histology is epithelial tissue. The last third is really connective tissue and just barely introducing muscle and neural tissue. So, all right, get your learn on, guys. Good luck.